Welcome to UCF Knightline, your source for UCF sports and former player information.
Hello, Night Nation. This is Andrew Phegley coming to you from the 1148 studios. This is episode number 57, and
I'm Trylko. Hello, everyone. Hey, Andrew. Anything going on?
Yeah, well, quite a bit going on today.
Yeah.
George O'Leary has decided to resign or retire, whichever way you would like to put that, a little bit more than mid-season through the season.
Following the 59-10 homecoming loss on Saturday to Houston.
Yeah. So we have a very long interview with Kyle Israel coming up in his segment of...
very candid. The most candid in these 8 weeks that we've been talking with Kyle about the program that we've heard.
Yeah, I think that you'll hear things here tonight that you'll only hear here on the Knightline podcast.
You're only going to hear from someone who has played for George O'Leary, who was in the locker room and understands what it was like to be around him.
Absolutely, yeah. So
respect for
absolutely,
him.
Yes.
But to say that he was not the most fun person to play for would be an understatement.
Right. I have shown my kind of unlike, I guess if that's a word, unlike for George O'Leary, dislike. That's funny. That's fine. I've shown my dislike for George O'Leary, for sure. But, in a way, I kind of do feel sorry for him for having to go out like this, not being able to finish the year, not being able to go out on a winning note and really secure his legacy. But I think his legacy is definitely secured. He's done a hell of a job here for UCF over the years. Not all of us liked him. Not all the players liked him. But he's done a hell of a job. He put UCF on the map as far as a football school. I'm not taking that away from him. Thank you, George O'Leary, for what you've done. Right off into the sunset, it's time for a new regime to come in here and fix it.
Well, there you go. Fix it. Well, let's get to the statement. No doubt some of our Knightline podcast listeners have read it on the message board, seen it in the newspaper, but he says, in an effort to allow UCF to accelerate its search for my successor and clarify the facts regarding my future plans, I am retiring effective immediately. Of course, he goes on to express thanks, talks about the accomplishments, which we'll talk a little bit about. President John Hitt, I have tremendous professional and personal respect for George and all he has done for UCF. We have been successful in the classroom and on the field under his watch, and his achievements have helped build the bonds that unite Knights everywhere. Interesting here, Andrew. This season, quoting Hitt, has been difficult, and I support George's decision to retire now so our program can begin planning for the future. The statement released by UCF indicates that this was his plan all along to retire this season. At the conclusion of this season, he just moved that up a couple of games to do what was in the best interest of the program, finding a successor, hitting the recruiting trail, and that follows just a couple weeks after Steve Spurrier made similar comments about doing what was best for that program in stepping down earlier. So George O'Leary making that decision public on Sunday, following, as we've talked about, an embarrassing, loss at a homecoming to go to O&A. You're supposed to schedule a patsy for homecoming. I guess Houston did. They scheduled UCF on our homecoming. Yeah. Top-ranked program, top 20 ranked Houston, but you can't have that. Sea of aluminum staring back at you. And you know what? I will always, as an alumni of this program, of this university, I will always support our student athletes and be there. I will tell you, I said it to you sitting next to you, I wasn't having a whole lot of fun. It wasn't very enjoyable.
I'll admit I left when the score reached 50. That was my point of breaking. I couldn't take it anymore, to be honest with you. I was so pissed off. And so just, when it reached that score, 50-10, I was out. And I've never left one on my own, never left a UCF game on my own will. Normally it's been, the girlfriend, the kids were hot, or whatever. But this one, when it became 50-10, it was time for me to go. Or I was going to start screaming things that I didn't want to scream and, all that stuff. So I don't know what there really is to say about the game. There's not a lot to say about the game. It seems
in the light of this news, it's really an afterthought. Believe it or not, right? UCF was leading Houston 10-7 until 2.5 minutes to go in the second quarter, much like a couple weeks earlier when things spiraled out of control with UConn, where you're down there in that game 9-3, and next thing you know, it's 23-3. Here it was, UCF leading 10-7, then 14, then 20. It just spun out in a couple of minutes. One of the best, I think, followers of UCF athletics on Twitter, a little shout-out to @UCF Sports Info, posted this. George O'Leary's UCF resume, 12 years, 7 bowls, 3 bowl wins, 1 BCS bowl win, 4 conference titles, 4 division titles, 2 top 25 seasons, 1 top 10 season. I know there are a lot of people that have been, this is not a good season. There's no doubt about it. There have been a lot of people very vocal. I think it's a minority, to be honest with you, that lurk on the message boards that are haters of George O'Leary, and no doubt are getting ready to start trashing the next coach when they arrive. But let's give the man his due. And the academic excellence that UCF has put forth for someone that graduated from this university, proud of this university, the success that he's had over the last decade plus enhances the diploma, folks. It makes this university relevant. Ups and downs, certainly, no doubt. But you look at those stretches before George O'Leary got here. The MAC, we were in the MAC. We were off in the wilderness as an independent. We were in the then 1AA. I remember we played an exhibition game at the Citrus Bowl against a Russian team. There wasn't anybody there. This program, on-campus stadium, facilities, he's done an awful lot, and we're not that far removed from the Fiesta Bowl. And this university athletic program, football program, its best days are not behind it. Its best days lie ahead of it, and I respect George O'Leary for making the decision, difficult as it must be to give up nearly 50 years, crying out loud, in football, to do this at this time. But his legacy, I think, for those who respect what he's done, is intact, and the haters are always going to be haters, Andrew.
Absolutely. I agree 100% with you. I see it a little bit different because I'm not an alumni of the school, so, I do see it a little bit different, but how can I not, as far as that goes? I'm definitely critical of some things in the way that he did some things, but he did it well and did a good job. I will never, ever try to take that away. There's no way that you can. As a true sports fan, you have to appreciate what he did, and I do. But it's time to move on. It's time to start over with a new coach, a new staff, and we'll see what happens. And hopefully we can continue, on the road to a Power 5 conference or whatever, and, make George O'Leary proud.
Well, let's talk about 2 things related to this announcement. Is that we learned on Sunday that the interim coach is going to be Danny Barrett, not Brent Key. And UCF quick to release a statement. Not a big surprise, I don't think, to a lot of fans, except some of the dollar figures involved, that Brent Key had a clause in his contract that he was the coach in waiting. But the buyout for that, as released by UCF, Grant Heston of the media relations and information director at UCF, releasing $700,000 buyout when Brent Key does not become the next head coach.
I think that's crazy for any university to sign a contract like that with any coach, no matter who they are and how bad you want to keep him on your staff. That's crazy.
Brent Key is going to land fine.
Yeah, he'll be fine.
All of these guys are experienced, and these guys are going to, they're going to land other jobs on this coaching staff. Personally, I'd love to see a career UCF guy like Sean Beckton, who I've come to know through the years is a great guy, remain in some way with this program. Of course, the next head coach will make that decision.
There are definitely people that need to have a chance to remain if they so choose it. I hope that those, Barrett and Becton both are the two guys that I think should have the opportunity to stay if they want to. And hopefully they get that opportunity.
You know, it's a strange season. It's the 25th of October as we record this. And in a couple of months since Todd Stansberry left as athletic director, we're now on 3 athletic directors, in a couple of months. Stansberry and then Coach O'Leary and now a third. Before we get to hiring a head coach, we've got to find an athletic director. And you look at this time frame here. We're on. We just completed Game 8. There'll be a bye week in there, 4 games remaining. You've got to get the new AD in there ASAP. And, of course, Coach O'Leary has resigned or retired from 2 jobs in less than 2 weeks before you can bring in a coach. And that coach has got to hit the recruiting trail and hire his assistants, no matter whether any of these folks currently on staff stay. And then signing day comes in February. I mean, this is a very tight, compressed schedule that has to happen now.
And I think that they're prepared to do that. I think that, the statement last week when he, stepped down from the AD thing, obviously opened the door for them to start working on it and to, figure it out. And I know that the timeline that they had was pretty short. I think they said something like the end of November or November 15th is when they wanted to have somebody. I think that's a pretty short timeline, but you're right. This does, I think, they need to get it in so we can still recruit players. We've, had a couple people that we had one in the last 24 hours that committed. And, we'll see what the people that have committed so far, if they stick around. I'm sure some of them won't, but I'm sure some of them will. So,
and in the midst of all the success, and we've talked about this not so much within the confines of the podcast, but even at the height of the success, coming off the Fiesta Bowl, a little bump in season tickets, a little bump in Golden Nightclub booster contributions, didn't sell out when they, when the season opened coming off of that Fiesta Bowl win. And the Central Florida Future had out an article headline, "Fewer UCF alumni donate than those at UF and USF." 250,000 alumni, and the Board of Trustees released that approximately 3 to 6% of those donate. That's between 7,500 and 15,000 people donate in any way, shape, or form, and that trails South Florida. So, the folks on the message boards and those hardcore folks, are you contributing to the program beyond griping about it? Because now you got to buy out all of these different people when you make these changes. This talk that we're getting the Lane Kiffins of the world, and we're going to be shelling out millions of dollars. I mean, this is not where UCF is as an athletic program. And any thought that this 0-8, in my opinion, is scuttling any consideration on the part of the Big 12 or any other conference, to me, is silly as well. I think everybody knows what you get in UCF. And one of the things that the Big 12 knows is that 3 to 6% of alumni donate. And they know that there are 4,000 boosters. Step up. Now's the time. Go to the remaining 2 home games. Okay, for those that wanted O'Leary out, he's gone. And the season, I know, is a difficult one. There's some building blocks. It's the perfect storm of things. New coordinators, young players, injuries, everything that could go wrong has gone wrong. Now it's time. We must look forward. We can't look back. And everybody's got to do their part. And as you listen to this, are you doing your part?
Well, it's going to be interesting for sure. I mean, it's definitely a new start for UCF that they haven't known in 12 years. So, things are definitely going to change. Hopefully this new coach, this new AD can get some of those, funds that they need. Maybe they can work together and I think some of the fans need to be brought back as well. I think that, this season has definitely run some people off. Hopefully not for too long, but they need to start working on getting those people back as well.
And that's something that we talked with Kyle about. The way we record this, sometimes things happen at different times based on scheduling availability. So when we talk about, we know what Kyle's going to talk about, it's because we shift things around a bit and we recorded this after. But I think the insight that he brings, Andrew, as a player who experienced a winless season, who understands what it's like to play for a hard-nosed guy like George O'Leary, who's certainly tough, demanding, but as we mentioned, has had success. The insight that Kyle gives us is just, when we sit here, we're listening to him, and we look at each other, we're like, oh, he just said that. Wow, that's insight.
Well, let's get to that because right now it is about a 60-minute interview with Kyle Israel. Welcome to Inside the Huddle with former UCF quarterback Kyle Israel, brought to you by the Little Greek Fresh Grill. Fresh, flavorful, fabulous. Waterford Lakes, 855 North Althea Trail, Orlando. All right, joining us on the phone right now, Kyle Israel. Kyle, welcome back. This has been kind of a crazy day. George O'Leary has retired. What are your thoughts?
It was an interesting feeling initially. I didn't expect it. I had came out and said this week that, I had learned and expected that Coach O'Leary would for sure step away after this season from some sources that I had. Then I got a little bit emotional. I wasn't crying per se, but I thought back to the times when Coach O'Leary started recruiting me, and being a part of his first class, being the first ever quarterback that he signed here at UCF, really being one of his first targets when he stepped on campus December 8th of 2003. They started recruiting me a couple days later. So I was just kind of reflecting on that and really how incredible what his vision was then, how that has really come to fruition over these past, 12 years. And that being, I had an offer that I was seriously considering to Florida State. And, Mississippi State and some other schools had offered, but I had narrowed it down to Florida State and UCF. And Coach O'Leary brought me into his office, myself and my father, and really sold me on the vision of taking UCF to the next level and where we could be down the road. Now, he said, you can be another good player in a long chain of players that have played at Florida State, or you can come here and actually be a part of building a foundation for the future student athletes at UCF, for the fan base that's going to be here in the future, and ultimately for your family down the road. You can be one of those guys that helps set that foundation. And that really spoke to me. I think it spoke to my father and my family. And he said, I don't know if you're ever going to be able to play in an on-campus stadium, but I bet you 10 years from now you can come back and help us, help us be a part of it for the opening ceremony of a new stadium. Now, that happened a lot quicker than I think anybody ever imagined. But he really, really had a vision for what he wanted to build here. And, he always said that if we're not interested in top 25, I want to be top 10. And we did that. And we won a Fiesta Bowl and, a BCS bowl game and so many things that we can get to later on in the podcast. But that's just kind of what I was reflecting on today. And really, even through the ups and downs and even how difficult it is to play for him sometimes, especially at the quarterback position, the negative thoughts that I've ever had, seemed to kind of go away today. And I was just appreciative of that chance that he gave me and so much for what he's done for the school.
The school loses homecoming, gets thrashed to Houston 0-8, but all of this seems so sloppily handled in some ways. This nonsense earlier in the week about the contract and who's going to release a contract, it just seems sloppy and slapped together. If they somehow had beaten Houston, would we be talking about this today?
I don't know. I don't believe that Coach would have stepped away or retired today. Had we have beaten Houston, we would have beaten the top 25 undefeated team. I'm sure he would have wanted to finish the season. But I think, I was up in the press box, or not in the press box, but in the club seats yesterday, and as I was leaving, I saw some big-time donors leaving as well early. And that, to me, was kind of like, ugh, that's not a good sign. And I just don't think that if we would have won that game, he would have retired today. I really don't. But, in his post-game comments and on his TV show that aired today, he said that it almost said that he can't figure this team out. They're not responding to adversity. And, I think that he potentially had lost this team to some degree, to be completely candid and honest, for whatever reason. I mean, the lack of success by the players themselves, sometimes they tend to get down on themselves and move away, and not be focused. But I think that if we would have won, then we wouldn't be having this conversation.
So arguably he inherited a program where the cupboard was bare, several losses, a winless season that begins his tenure with UCF, and now all of the string of losses to end his career at UCF. But it's really the perfect storm, right? New offensive coordinator, new defensive coordinator, the injuries, the depletion to graduation. Is the cupboard bare, or is there stuff to build on here for this next head coach?
There's so much to build on for this next head coach. And anybody that thinks at all that the cupboard is bare just doesn't really know the circumstances here at UCF. I'll tell you when a cupboard is bare. A cupboard is bare when going into 2004 season there's a hurricane and tons of storms, and we get 9 or 10 practices going into our first game at Wisconsin because we don't have an indoor practice facility. Well, we have an indoor practice facility now. Our practice fields that we're on now was a tree line when Coach O'Leary started here. The Wayne Dench football facility, there was nothing behind it, and now we have a 45,000 seat stadium. The athletic village that has been built here at UCF, the dorms and everything else on that part of campus with the new CFE arena and everything. Coach O'Leary really, in my mind, and to me, was a huge part of why all of that is here today. So cupboard was there back then, absolutely, and now there is that foundation here to move the program forward. When you talk about in the locker room and you talk about players, there's some missing pieces, certainly. Nothing that I don't think recruiting can fix. But there's a lot of young talent on this team that are talented players that have played a ton this season. And that will be noticeable in the years moving forward. And we've gone from a point where we're in a MAC conference where all of our opponents were up in the Northeast for the most part, made the move to Conference USA, dominated that conference. Outside of this year, when we moved to the AAC, we've dominated the AAC up until this point in this season. And at one point, people only knew of us as Central Florida. And we were some school down in Orlando, Florida. And now people know nationwide what UCF and who UCF is. And in my mind, George O'Leary is, for the most part, the biggest reason for that. Because of the exposure on national television, because of the success we had nationally, some of the big wins that we've had over the past couple of years, because of some of the talent we've put in the NFL that are, notable guys. All of that stems from the decision to hire George O'Leary on December 8th, 2003. And there's plenty to build on here in the future.
I've talked a lot about how I don't like that in George O'Leary's press conferences and things, he never takes any responsibility for, what's happened on the field. Is this finally him taking a little bit of responsibility for, the year this year and the way things have panned out this year?
Well, let me ask you this question. What would you like to hear? Because I'm wondering, when somebody's asking for somebody to take responsibility, what is it that you're looking for?
A lot of coaches come out in their press conference and say, look, this is on me, this is on coaching, we didn't prepare them right, all that stuff. I've never heard O'Leary say that one time, and I think that there's a lot of other people that feel the same way. So that's what I'm talking about.
I think that for a coach to say that, there's two ways coaches can say that. One, just to take the spotlight off of the players, I guess. Two, if they truly feel that they did prepare a team to win, then I wouldn't expect the coach to come out and say that. So I think that George probably believes, right or wrong, that he, gets this team ready to play from a game point perspective just about as well as they possibly can. I think there's certainly times where he could come out and say that for sure. But if you're asking if this is him taking responsibility, I don't know that I would put it that way. I just think that the writing was on the wall for sure. I think that if he had a conversation with Dr. Hitt yesterday, Coach O'Leary in the last couple press conferences that I've seen just looks worn out and tired and beaten down. And you could tell that this season is really taking a toll on him physically and mentally. So I think all of that led to it. And, sometimes I think that you can come to a point where you say, hey, this just isn't working. And if I'm already anticipating leaving at the end of this year, the time is now. And I think, I can appreciate him doing it now, because hopefully we can get some people back in the stands for these next couple of games, and we can get on the recruiting trail, whatever that means, at least in the minds of recruits potentially looking at UCF. They know that there's going to be a new head coach in here.
None of us know who the next head coach is going to be. We don't even know who the next athletic director is going to be, but we did learn Sunday that UCF spokesperson Grant Heston confirmed offensive coordinator Brent Key to be paid $700,000 if not named the Knights' next head football coach. What was your reaction to hearing that?
Well, I've known this for 2 years, and it was a thing that I didn't think it was. I was never in favor of it because I didn't think that that decision was probably the right one at the time when you were basically putting something in a contract that said that this coach, who had only ever been an offensive line coach, not a coordinator, not a head coach at another school, nothing else, we were basically saying that he was, for lack of a better term, the head coach in waiting almost, and certainly going to protect him in the case that he was not named head coach. Now, I think that Coach O'Leary was afraid potentially of losing Brent Key to some other schools, and I've seen some people writing on the Dungeon and other things, message boards about how other schools, they couldn't believe other schools would hire Brent as a coordinator or head coach. And I think that most of those offers or interviews that he was going out for were offensive line coaching positions at larger schools where the money was certainly going to be better. So I think that was Coach O'Leary's way of taking care of Brent, and he had the leverage to do it at that point in time. But I just hope that it's something that our school can figure out a way to do financially, because as we all know, UCF doesn't have the largest athletic budget in the world.
Coach Barrett has been named interim head coach for the rest of the season. What do you think about that move, and what do you think about him?
I think that's a great move. He's a guy that's been a head coach for 6 years, 5 or 6 years in the CFL. He was a collegiate quarterback himself. I think that we're probably going to see – I'd be interested to see the dynamic in game preparation and play calling moving forward, because Coach Barrett, this may be a job interview for him somewhere else moving forward, whether it's on a coordinator role or a head coach at a different school, smaller school down the road. This is a way for him to show kind of the world who Danny Barrett is. And he's been a head coach. He's had success. I think he's a great offensive mind from what I've been told. I don't know what type of offense we would run under him, but I do think that he's a guy that's going to keep the ship stable moving forward. I think he's going to be a guy that's going to motivate this football team. And I think that was the best decision moving forward for the football program today. You're
pretty successful right now with a Little Greek and other business ventures, but I'm going to assume the role of Dr. Hitt and name you athletic director, okay? What are you looking for in the next head coach?
I'm looking for, number one, a guy that's going to be, certainly has had success in recruiting himself. I think UCF right now, I would look at some former recruiting classes. I would look at what that coach has done with the talent that he's had at his school, because we don't know where this guy is going to be coming from. I would look for a guy that may use UCF as a stepping stone to the next level would not scare me at all, because that's what, we've been lucky with Coach O'Leary that he's been here as long as he has been. But there are a lot of coaches coaching in Power 5 conferences that have used schools where we are at this point as a stepping stone to that level and done great things for those universities. So that wouldn't scare me away. And I would look for a guy that is going to have the charisma and be a character that can engage a fan base. I think that we have a really, really young fan base in the grand scheme of things. that wants to be engaged, that wants to feel like they're included, that wants to see new things. And I think that a person that can be out in the community and reach out in the community and get people engaged and involved is going to be crucial in that position. And I would personally go with somebody that's offensive-minded. I think when you look at the type of talent that we have in the state of Florida, especially at the skill positions, we can be a school that can recruit talented guys on the outside and at the running back position to spread the ball out and throw it. And right now in our conference, if you're looking at what these teams are doing, they're scoring. And I know that, one of the most remarkable things about Coach O'Leary and his time here in the conferences that we've been in, especially Conference USA, we were very successful being generally a pro-style offense because we played such good defense against teams that every other week were scoring 40 and 50 points. And Coach O'Leary was just so good, for the most part, in our best seasons at stopping these high-powered offenses. And I think that it's going to be very difficult to find a defensive-minded coach as good as Coach O'Leary to be able to come to this university. You got to keep in mind, despite what happened with his time there, Coach O'Leary was the next head coach at Notre Dame, and we were fortunate enough to have him at UCF for 12 years. But we definitely, I think, need a guy that's going to use the talent that the state of Florida is completely. It has such a rich talent base. You have such a rich talent base here in the state of Florida that I think you need to get skilled guys and a guy, in my mind, I think that can coach quarterbacks, that understands the importance of the quarterback position to bring to us a really high-powered offense, one that's going to sell tickets, one that's potentially going to be able to compete in a Power 5 conference like the Big 12. When we look at the Baylors, Texas Techs, Oklahoma States of the world, if that's ever a goal of ours, those would be some of the things I'd be looking at.
So there's going to be a lot of names that are bounced around on message boards. Already you're hearing names like Lane Kiffin, for crying out loud. And you see in Houston, they brought in former Ohio State offensive coordinator Tom Herman. And, boy, they've really put up a lot of points, and 59 on UCF. If you had to guess, is it an established name that everybody knows, or is it someone, boy, we've got to catch lightning in a bottle with a guy like Tom Herman?
I would think that it'd be an up-and-coming type of guy. Big-time coordinator, guy that's had success at a lesser school in regards to conference or level. You look at Fuente, what he's done at Memphis. He was the guy that kind of snuck onto the scene. I see us going that direction. People throwing all types of names out there, Schiano, Butch Davis. I don't think we have a shot at those guys personally, and I'm not sure that Schiano would be a guy that would be the right fit for our school. He's almost like a George O'Leary mold in regards to his temperament and those sorts of things. I don't think people are looking for that again at this point in time, but I think it's probably going to be a coordinator or a guy that's been a head coach, for a MAC team or something along those lines is probably who I think we'll end up with.
Do you think that Danny Barrett will be a candidate?
I don't believe so. And I think in something that I read today, Dr. Hitt may have mentioned, and don't quote me on this, but I thought that I read this in passing, that it was clear that we were going to be moving outside of the current coaching staff for that new head coach position. So I don't think that Coach Barrett will be a part of that, no.
Yeah, he did say that. The other thing that I was going to ask, you talked a couple weeks ago, maybe last week or the week before, about how the players that are on this team right now, these last few weeks, these last few games could be an audition for the next head coach. No matter who it was, when it was going to happen, whatever. But there could be a new head coach coming in here, and that those players should be showing whatever they can right now on film for that guy to see. It's obviously happening now. So what is it important for those players to do more now than ever in these last few games?
Certainly find a way to, I'm going to continue to say that they need to be playing for pride at this point. I mean, there's no bowl games, there's nothing else, but you're still representing the university. And when you think about a new coach coming in, like I said a few weeks back, if I was a current player, I'd be thinking about the possibility of a new head coach coming in and evaluating tape. That coach is going to come in and evaluate the tape and look at players and really try to break it down. And I'm sure they're going to give these players opportunities to win jobs on the field, on the practice field, but first impressions do a lot, right? That's in every aspect of life. And so when a coach looks on film and sees these players playing, he's going to start evaluating them and getting his first impressions of those players. And so it's absolutely, I think it should be in the front of the minds, number one, to just get out there and try and win a football game, especially because in my mind we got two of the schools that we really don't like. Can't stand East Carolina myself, and then obviously South Florida, and we've had some level of rivalry with Tulsa over the years in Conference USA and some Conference USA championship games. So we got some games that are still really important, I think, for our fan base and for these players. But they got to understand that there's going to be new people evaluating them, new faces, a lot of change. It's going to be an interesting process for these players over the next 4 to 5 months. I think that they have to consider that somebody's going to be watching that film and evaluating that's not going to be George O'Leary.
So how do the players react like this week? How do the players come out during the week, this week in practice and next week in the game? How do you think that they will react to the news and to having the change with Barrett being the head coach instead of George O'Leary?
My candid response, probably positively. With all the positives that I've said about Coach O'Leary and what he's done for us, he's a very difficult person to play for. It's not always a comfortable place to be inside of that football facility, and I'm not so much sure that he would have it any other way. I think Coach likes players walking around on eggshells. I think he likes them being a little bit uncomfortable. I don't know Coach Barrett personally, but when you have a presence like George O'Leary gone, it is felt. And I think that it's going to be something that will breathe some life into this team for this season, and it'd be interesting to see how they respond to Coach Barrett. But for whatever it's worth, and as you guys know, I've always kind of been careful about what I have said over the years in the media, and that is because Coach O'Leary tries to hear and listen to everything that is said about this program. And in an odd way today, when as much as I think he's done so much for us, there was some level of a weight lifted off my shoulders even, just knowing that I could kind of speak freely. Not that I had really anything negative to say, but that I just didn't have to kind of walk on eggshells and be careful about what I said because of how that could, affect my status as a former player within the program, if that makes any sense at all, although it may not.
It absolutely does. It absolutely does. We know what you've been saying. We've talked about this before, you and I off the air. That's absolutely, we know. I know what you're talking about.
People don't think that Coach O'Leary was an absolutely understanding of what is said on message boards, if people don't think that Coach O'Leary had no idea what's being said on the radio or being released in articles, you're out of your mind. He knows more than most people could ever imagine about what's being said about his football program over the last 12 years. And it was almost remarkable how much he can find out when he really wants to. You got to give him credit for that, because he's almost found a way to just put this little bubble around his program and figure out what's being said about it. And it's an interesting way of doing things, but it was certainly his way.
Well, he is often described as old school. Might we also in some way say that it's a bit outdated as well, that hard-nosed approach that maybe today's graduating high school student, incoming college freshman is looking for a different relationship with a head coach than that hard-nosed approach that George O'Leary brings?
100%. That's a 100% fact. And I even when I was getting recruited, back in 2003 and 2004, it was something that I considered. There was really no baseline for me to judge the type of coach that Coach O'Leary was going to be, because certainly at UCF, because I was in that first class. But you always hear players talk about a player's coach and those type of things. And I think it's harder to relate to kids these days, more so even than a couple of years ago. And there are so many coaches that you see around the country that are jumping up and chest bumping their players and really fiery on the sidelines in a positive way. I think that there's a lot of good that can come out of that. Coach O'Leary really coached by fear. I don't think that he would, that's the way that he knew how to win. I think that his roots up there in Islip, New York, where he's from, and his Irish family and his heritage. I think that those are all things that were instilled in him. And I think many of those things are very good things to the game of football. But to never really follow it up with positive reinforcement, in my opinion, outside of the rare times that he would, makes it very stressful to always be in kind of a authoritarian type of environment, for lack of a better term. And I think that for some players, it's difficult to be in that environment. And usually you're going to have one or two guys. I can remember one or two guys every year that just couldn't take it anymore. My best friend, who was a starting middle linebacker for us his true freshman year when we went to the Hawaii Bowl in 2005, just flat out quit the next season. And I just don't think that he responded well to the type of coach that Coach O'Leary was. Now, does that mean that Coach O'Leary was a bad coach? No. It just meant that for some people, that type of style doesn't work, and people don't respond to it well. And he likes to coach the guys that know how to respond to it. But I think there's been other guys along the way that could have been good football players for this program that may not, just been able to deal with that. And had they been dealt with in a different way or in a more positive manner, maybe they could have been good players for us. But I think, every coach is going to have some level of toughness to them. Coach O'Leary was just a guy that he says he always based people on their toughness. And the best thing he could ever say about you 10 years down the road when he thinks back about the type of player you are, if he called you a tough guy, that means that he really respected you. So that's just the type of program that he ran. I think that in this day and age is much more difficult to find players that can fit into that mold than it is somebody who's more of a player's coach.
We know you love the game of football. You traveled all around the world to play it. Did you have fun playing for Coach O'Leary?
No. I had fun winning, and I had fun with my teammates. Just fun isn't the word that comes to mind when I think about playing for Coach O'Leary. I respect the coach that he is, and I respect the person that he is for doing it the way that he did it and being successful at that for so many years. But I would not classify playing for Coach O'Leary as a fun experience.
It's amazing, though, what a little bit of positive reinforcement can do to a person's psyche. My coach in college was definitely not a positive reinforcement person, and I've had jobs over the years that, I worked in the music industry, which some of these people know that listen. Music is a very cutthroat business. There's always a million people that are standing behind you wanting your job, and if you mess up and you don't get along and you do the wrong things and blah, 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 all those people are waiting to get your job. And I don't know how many times I've been told that, and that being a football player in college is your job, and a student, of course, but really being a football player on scholarship is your job. But that's one of the things that I never have really appreciated from George O'Leary. I know that's just the way that he does it, but I think some positive reinforcement could have gone a long way, and I think that we've already talked about that enough. I
use positive reinforcement in my management style currently, and I think that I can see definitely how it gets the best out of people.
Absolutely. I mean, you tell somebody that they've done a good job and they have pride. You tell somebody all the time how bad they suck, and it's a totally different thing. It puts an amazing weight on your shoulders. I'm not saying that he told people they sucked. I'm just saying that he wasn't a guy that used a lot of positive reinforcement, and that can go a long way either way. Kids nowadays get a lot more positive reinforcement in a lot of things than I did as a kid. I didn't win medals and trophies for finishing. I won medals and trophies for winning. And that's a big difference between when George O'Leary, started coaching and now. And I think that, that's going to be a big difference with maybe a younger head coach, hopefully a younger head coach. I don't think we need anybody that's 65 years old to come in here, and he wasn't 65 when he started, but I do think that will go a long way with somebody giving these kids a little bit of positive reinforcement.
Absolutely.
I want to shift over and talk a little bit about your reaction to the to Saturday's game and the 59-10 loss. UCF led that game just a couple of minutes left in the first half, 10-7, and had played pretty well. And then the wheels came off very quickly, as we have seen at other moments during the season. Your reaction to the embarrassment that was the homecoming loss?
Disappointing and really embarrassing, just on a national scale, really, to see us lose like that and really just outplayed and outclassed by Houston. I really think that Coach Q was calling a good game there early on, and obviously we had the early fumble that went back for a touchdown, but we had what I thought was a good offensive game plan again. For the last couple of weeks in a row, you can never really see the game plan evolve because we always get so behind as of late. But it just becomes obvious that this team can't deal with adversity, and the youth, it hasn't been instilled in them yet how to handle that. And it's like one bad thing happened, and we went down 14-10. It was like the whole game was over. And I just don't think that this team thinks there's any hope that they can do anything offensively if they get behind. Because we haven't, we're ranked last in the country for a reason. So once you get behind, it's like, we can barely even score a few touchdowns, much less get ourselves back in a football game. And then that feeds the defense and just all downhill from there. So hopefully this team over the last couple of games, if not anything else, can really just start to build some confidence going into the offseason and putting together one or two games where the whole team plays pretty good the entire game. But for homecoming and for what it was, I think it was just about as bad as an atmosphere, environment, and game that I've probably ever seen from a fan perspective. Now, losing at South Florida, which is a game that I did not play good in personally in 2007, that was probably the worst loss in UCF history that I've been a part of, albeit South Florida's ranked number 2 after that game in the country. They're a very good team that year, but we played horrible, and that was just so embarrassing with it being against South Florida. I certainly figured out what death threats were after that game. But, this one was right up there with that, and I think that with Coach O'Leary, announcing his retirement, it's going to be kind of, the focus is going to go away from this game pretty quickly, as it should be. And you got to give credit to Houston. They are a really, really talented football team. Ward, their quarterback, is one of the best in the country. I mean, he can just move so gracefully and so fast, and Coach Herman's doing a great job with those guys. And I'm sure they're going to represent the conference well throughout the end of the year. But you can tell where the standard is in this conference of where we need to get athletically. And we're, at this point in time, we're not there. So the game was disappointing, and the environment was disappointing, and I never thought in my life that I would ever see another person wearing a bag over their head at a UCF game, because that was kind of something I certainly experienced from the player's perspective, and it's not a good feeling. And those were returning. So it was just a disappointing homecoming, to say the least.
Talk a little bit about the quarterback play from Justin.
It's interesting. I still think that he's struggling some, obviously. I think that we had things going there in the beginning with, the short passing game was working, and we had a little bit more support from the running game, but, I'm not really sure what some of those interceptions were just not good balls and were just poor throws. And, here's what I will say. If Justin continues this way going into the offseason, then there's certainly, in my mind, going to be a quarterback battle with the new head coach this year that's going to ensue this upcoming spring between Tyler Harris, Bo Schneider, Justin, and whatever freshman they sign, if they do sign a freshman quarterback, because it doesn't seem to be the same player as we saw last year. Although what I will say is that he had some of these type of throws and instances last year, they were just hidden more. This year, it's very obvious to see. And I'm not saying he's a bad quarterback at all, but he's certainly not getting the help around him that I think he was accustomed to last season with the wide receiver corps that we had. But I think that he feels, some of the pressure that he needs. He's the reason that he's the way that we're going to win games, and you start to force passes, and you start to lose confidence. Being a quarterback, a lot of it has to do with confidence, and And when you're not winning football games and you're struggling, it's hard to find that confidence level, which ultimately helps lead to success. So I don't know exactly the reason that he's performing the way that he is, but, I know he's extremely talented, and hopefully he'll just continue to get better. You still got to remember, he's got one more year to put it all together, and hopefully he can do that.
So if you had to guess here as we record, Justin gets the start at Cincinnati on Saturday?
Yeah, if I were to guess, I would say that. Yeah, absolutely.
And we saw 3 quarterbacks play against Houston. That's not the first time this season where we've seen multiple quarterbacks. Do we see multiple quarterbacks again this coming week?
It's so hard. It's going to be interesting now because I don't know the psyche of Coach Barrett like I do Coach O'Leary, so I don't know what Danny Barrett's going to do. I wouldn't be surprised to be candid with you, but I know that Danny Barrett's not out there to just fill a void for a couple games. He's going to be out there, like I said in the opening, to win. He's going to be out there because this is basically an opportunity for him to show college football the type of potential head coach he can be. And so I think he's going to put the guy on the field that gives him the best chance to win. I don't know if Justin has played much better than what we would see out of Tyler Harris or Bo Schneider, other than his ability to run these past 2 games. So it'll be interesting to see who starts and who plays for us next week, and I'll be just as interested as everybody else.
Well, at one point yesterday, I probably lost a little bit of my voice by screaming, okay, can we put another quarterback in at one point after an interception? Mm-hmm. I think that maybe it would put a little bit of life into people if one guy's getting us down and just throwing interceptions and all that. I don't know that anybody else would do it better, but maybe just a change in one of these games where it all goes bad and then just to throw somebody else in there. I don't know if that would be a good thing or a bad thing, but at one point I was begging them to take him out. It was going downhill so fast.
It seems to snowball like that sometimes, and it's interesting that Coach didn't go to that sooner. Now, I don't know if that's because he thinks Justin is so much better than those other 2 guys, which on the field it doesn't look like it at this point in time, right? When you just look at how he's playing per se. So I was kind of intrigued myself that it took Coach longer to go to the backup than it did. But it's just one of those things. In years past, he would have had Justin out of the game quickly. But at this point, I figure, we don't have anything to lose, so he's probably just continuing to let Justin play, for better or for worse.
Yeah, and we don't know what Coach Barrett's philosophy is going to be. Maybe it's going to be a completely different philosophy. We don't know. Obviously, he's a coach under O'Leary, or has been a coach under O'Leary. Now he's a head coach himself. He could change the philosophy a little bit. Back to what we mentioned this a little while ago, and this has been one of the things that we've talked about for the last, 6 months, maybe even longer, is the Power 5. That question comes up to me quite often, but tonight is a little bit different. Does this help or hurt UCF going to the Power 5 not having George O'Leary?
That's a really, really tough question. The thing that I will say, I don't think that George O'Leary was ever the reason we were being considered for the Power 5. I think that other factors determine it, where we're positioned, television market, alumni base, future alumni size, the state of Florida, the recruiting hotbed being here, obviously the success the past couple of years. I don't think that anybody making a list of why UCF should go to the Power 5 would put a tally mark and say, well, because George O'Leary is head coach also. He's one of the reasons we want to have UCF in our conference. So I don't think it makes a difference. I think what it does show is that the leadership at UCF is going to do whatever we can to turn this program around. That there's I think that they may look at who the new head coach is and the track record that he has and where he's been, but I don't think the head coach is ever going to determine, or be too much of a factor in a potential move like that. But I certainly think that the athletic director position is going to have a huge aspect, or, play a huge role in a potential move like that.
Do you think that athletic director that they hire should come from one of the Power 5 conferences and a school that is involved in that?
I only think they should come from there if that's the best candidate available that we can get. I don't think that it is 100% necessary that we get somebody from there, from the Power 5 and from the Big 12. But I do think that there are a lot of great ADs and head coaches all around the country right now. There's only 3 athletic director position openings in the country, so the pool for candidates is large, and there's not much competition in regards to potential ADs openings this year. I think it's going to be more difficult to probably find a head coach when you think about Miami firing Al Golden today, and some other moves that are going to take place that have already taken place, and other coaching changes that are going to happen throughout the course of the end of this season. I think that's going to be a harder job to fill, but I don't think that the coach or the athletic director necessarily has to be from the Power 5 school or has to be from one of those conferences for us to still have an opportunity to be a part of a bigger conference. I think when you look within UCF, the president of ESPN is good friends with Dr. Lapchick, who's one of the talented, incredible professors that we have here on campus. And he is really good friends, I do know, with the president of ESPN. And so I think that relationship can play a role, and other types of relationships like that can play a role in helping the potential move to the Power 5. But I don't think that the coaches or the athletes are necessarily have to be from the Power 5.
You mentioned earlier about how a new coach is going to have to come in here and win the fans over and, show how he can excite fans. One of the first questions that I had from a fan after telling this fan that George O'Leary had retired this evening, resigned, whatever you want to say, the very first question or the first statement that they made was, wow, we can finally have the names on the jerseys. I know that this is a little bit of a trivial thing, but to players, it's really not that much of a trivial thing. In the large scheme of things, it is, but to fans and players, it can be a really big deal, and it's always been one of George O'Leary's things. Also, not having any of the flashy uniforms, the alternate uniforms, things like that. So, what does that mean to you to have your name on the back of the jersey, or not?
Well, I was a part of the team that in the George O'Leary era that actually had in 2004 we did have our names on the back of our jerseys, and the next year he took them off. I mean, it means a lot, honestly, when you have the name that you bear, your last name, on the back of your jersey. I mean, that's something that that notoriety is something that you always want, and you want to represent your family. So I do think that it's really important to players to have that. And when I think back, I believe even at Georgia Tech, like I remember seeing when Coach O'Leary was there, George Godsey and Joe Hamilton, and those guys had their names on the back of their jerseys when he was coaching at Georgia Tech. So I don't know if that's something he decided when he got here.
What was it that made him take those names off of y'all's jerseys? Was it a specific event?
We went 0-11.
Oh, okay.
We went 0-11, and then it happened.
Okay. Well, that could have been it.
He always said that, nobody wore the number 1 here. It was trained and put outside our locker room in the hallway leading into the locker room, and that was something that he always said nobody was greater than the team, and that's kind of when he delivered that message to us. That's when he also took the names off the back of the jersey, that it was a team game and that nobody should be really individually recognized.
But that's the way that people get to the NFL as well. I mean, the name recognition, that's one of the things that it's easier for NFL scouts and everybody else to know who they are. So, I mean, I think it would be huge to players to have their name on their jerseys and to have people know who they are recognizably easy. And I understand fans from the stands that don't know the roster and don't know, who these players are to easily. So I understand the fans, we had those crazy uniforms for the USF game a couple of years ago, and then George O'Leary, well, we're never going to use those helmets again. The helmets were bad luck, blah, blah, blah. But you see all these other schools, this is a recruiting thing as far as I'm concerned. You see all these other schools that have all these nice jerseys and UCF and helmets and alternate uniforms. UCF doesn't have any of those. So I don't know. Maybe that will be, a thing that the new coach can bring in and allow to happen. It was hard to even get George O'Leary to let them wear the black jerseys, and he's done it the last couple of games. I think maybe to put a little bit of a boost in the players' psyche. I don't know, but
I think that, it is something that we need to do. I know that we don't have the most desirable contract with Nike or the most funds in our bank account. So I'm hoping that in the future that there's ways to create new uniforms or new uniforms for particular games. But, I mean, if kids didn't care about how they looked or what they were wearing, then you wouldn't see all these national camps and combines with all these crazy, colorful things. Under Armour, with its game and with all the camps that it has and all these Nike combines, they have really cool, workout clothing that they give out to players. And that's part of the selling point of coming to those camps. And if you don't think that these players care a little bit about what their uniforms are going to wear in college or what style cleats or those type of things, I mean, you're naive. Other than, if you went to Oregon, you're going to be in a high-powered offense. But if you also went to Oregon, you're going to have some of the sweetest uniforms in the country and have some of the best facilities in the country. I mean, that started the trend. And Nike didn't come up with these combat uniforms because people didn't care. And so I think that is something that, players feel good when they play in something they think is cool, I guess, for lack of a better term. And hopefully we can do some of that in the future here.
To tie this all up, when the news broke late Sunday, you took to Twitter at KIsrael07 and said, "I will forever be grateful for the opportunity that George O'Leary gave me at UCF. He should be remembered for the great things he did." Have we seen the last of George O'Leary with the UCF program in any form or fashion, or can he be a part of it into the future somehow?
I think that we've seen the last of George in an active role with UCF. When you have somebody that is such a dominant figure and polarizing figure within a school and a community and really only sees things from his perspective, in my opinion, I don't see how he could stay around in an active role unless he had some prior relationship with the new athletic director or new head coach on some level where maybe you saw him around the facility. But I don't know what his goals are. I don't know if he wants to. He has a really beautiful lake home on a lake outside Atlanta, Lake Lanier, I think. And I'm sure he's got some other toys and other places that he wants to visit. And I don't know what his future endeavors are going to be, but I don't see him being actively involved with UCF in the future. But I do hope that he returns and comes back, and I hope that we find a special way to commemorate what he's done at UCF in the future. People throw the idea of a statue around, and I don't think that's a bad idea. He had a great pose after we won the Fiesta Bowl, and I think that he did a lot for this team and this community when it comes to UCF football. And there's been a lot of great memories made over the last 12 years, that are special moments in people's lives, bowl games and championships and all types of things that happened that I'm not sure many people believed ever could happen here at UCF. I think back to 2005 when we made it to the conference championship against Tulsa, and to see the lower bowl, the Citrus Bowl, completely full, 53,000 people was just like, wow, he did this in 2 years, and we're here, and I'm going on a trip to Hawaii for a bowl game. He's done so much, and I know that he has more special relationships with people in the community than he gets credit for, and I know that he always looked out. Ultimately, at the end of the day, Coach O'Leary looked out for his players, and he always made sure we were eating well. He always made sure that we were taken care of when we were traveling in hotels and our living situation. He wanted to make sure that we were comfortable, maybe not always mentally comfortable, but certainly physically comfortable in our living and daily life type of experience. And, I can say that about him. And I can also say that anytime that his players have ever needed anything, he'd gone to him one-on-one. He's always willing to go out of his way to help. And I remember back in 2013, Dante Culpepper and I went into Coach O'Leary's office and was just willing, asking what he could do and how he could help and how could we work together. And, that's just kind of the guy that he's always been one-on-one. Can he be difficult with in a group setting? Sure, absolutely. But if you ever go to him in need of something, Coach O'Leary is always the guy that seems to go out of his way to do whatever he can to help you. Whether he's, and you think about the coaching tree that he has underneath him throughout this country and how he's helped coaches start their careers and go on to great careers in coaching. I mean, he's done so much for a lot of people, through his time here at UCF. My former roommate, Ed Manowitz, at UCF was a quarterback, and Coach O'Leary helped him get a job with the Dolphins, hired him as the recruiting coordinator basically out of UCF, helped him get a job with the Dolphins, helped him get a job as the recruiting coordinator for Nick Saban at Alabama, and now he's vice president, director of player personnel for the Philadelphia Eagles. And that's really because of the opportunity that George O'Leary gave Ed. Obviously, Ed is incredible in what he does, but Coach O'Leary gave him that opportunity, and there's so many stories that are just like that. So, I don't think that he's a bad guy at all. I think that he's actually very caring. He just had a tough style of coaching. And an interesting way of dealing with the fans and the media. But ultimately, I think he has a good heart and really cares about the people around him. And I think that we could commemorate and do something special for him in the future at UCF, whether that is a statue and at the very minimum bringing him back at a game and really thanking him for what he did.
We all know Coach O'Leary's work ethic. Sometimes it got a little confusing how he was in the office till 4 o'clock watching tape and then was back in the office at 5 o'clock in the morning to, get ready for the day. Had that hour-long meeting with the people when he was the athletic director. You know him pretty well. Do you think that he sleeps a little bit better tonight? Do you think that he's relieved to have this weight lifted off of his shoulders?
I think in some sense that he probably is, like most human beings would be. But I know that there's this, burning competitive fire inside of Coach O'Leary that makes it extremely difficult probably to sleep at the same time. Because I know ultimately, even though now we're hearing that his contract and his decision to basically retire after this season, before it ever started, he kind of knew that it was going to be going in this direction. I think that there is a weight lifted off his shoulders, but I think that there's probably a level of disappointment in if you're just looking at this season with how it went. Now, I'm sure that he's going to take time and look back at what he's done over the years and feel like he really made a mark and put us in the right direction and did so much for us. I think he'll realize that if he doesn't already, which I'm sure he does. But there's got to be some level for any human being who's been going through what he has been going through, really, certainly last week, in the past couple of weeks with this football team. And I think that he probably feels a little bit of a weight lifted. And he, like I said a minute ago, that he really takes care of the people around him. I think on some level he's probably a little bit disappointed for the coaching staff and for the people that work for him here at the school, because now he knows ultimately that that's going to change. And the only way that he was going to be able to protect those people and keep them working here for sure after his time was done was for probably ultimately Brent Key to be the head coach and for him to be the athletic director, which I think we saw that was trying to be developed earlier on this year when Todd stepped away to Oregon State, that was the way that he was going to be able to keep things going with his vision. And ultimately that's not going to be the case anymore.
All right, one last thing here before we wrap this up. It's been a long interview, and we thank you very much. What do you think's going to happen with fan support in the next few weeks? Do you think the next game at Bright House Stadium is going to have some more people wanting to see a revitalization maybe of this program? Or do you think that the fans are going to stay home now because they know that the season's lost?
I don't know that we're going to have any sellouts, right? But I think that we're going to see better fan support than certainly what we did this past Saturday. And this was the first time that I noticed some faces missing. I sat up in the club section today, and there were so many open seats in that club section. And you got to pay a lot of money to get those tickets for a season. So to not be there when there's a game says a lot. I think that we're going to see the fans come back out and be supportive. I think there's going to be some intrigue around Danny Barrett. I think there's going to be some intrigue with this team and how they respond to somebody outside of George O'Leary. When you think about only seeing George O'Leary coach a football team for the past 12 seasons. And ultimately, you know, for me, I hate East Carolina with a passion. Almost more than I do anybody else. They are right there with South Florida for me. And we've had some really good games with them over the years. And I think that's a game that, you know, every year people really like to be at. They're one of the teams we've been playing for a long time. And then obviously South Florida, albeit Thanksgiving Day. But I think the fans are going to show up. I don't think that we're going to have 45,000. I wouldn't be surprised if we have 30, 32, 35,000 at some of these next games, and that may be a good sign for any type of conference affiliation that is looking at UCF in the future of how we respond. You know, were we really not supporting our university, or were we not supporting George O'Leary at this point in time? And if the fan base comes back, that may be a response to people that are kind of watching our team and our program from a distance and say, well, they're not losing their fan base, but they had a frustrated fan base for a few games, and now that things are changing, those people are coming back out and supporting, and that's ultimately what we're really concerned about. And I think that is important and something we need to do.
Tell us a little bit about what's going on at the Little Greek this week.
Well, I got a lot of questions about George O'Leary today, so that was certainly going on. But this will be the second week in a row that we've broken our weekly totals, and again, we just appreciate the support. Not a whole lot new going on other than we are going to be changing our weekend hours to 10 p.m. When we're closing as we move into the holiday season. There is a Boo and Brew, which is basically, like I mentioned last week, we will be giving out candy. Waterford Lakes Town Center is going to be a safe place, and they're expecting over 2,500, 3,000 trick-or-treaters making their way around Waterford Lakes next weekend for the Boo and Brew. You can also buy tickets and sample beer as well out at Waterford Lakes, and we'll be a part of that entire experience. So we're just looking forward to the holiday time of the year. Obviously, the traffic in Waterford Lakes helps business, but I'm very appreciative and thankful for the support that we've seen. And I have had a number of people that have come in and said that they've listened to the podcast and, want to. Sometimes when I'm at the register, I have to remind everybody, hey, I have to take care of this next guest. But if you go to your table, I'll be over there in a couple minutes to talk a little UCF football with you. But it's going good.
Awesome. I'm glad that we could help you out with that. And I'm glad that people, actually come in and say that they heard you on here, and people really appreciate you being on here. We really, really appreciate you being on here, especially with your insight for, a situation like tonight. We really appreciate you coming on and telling us your true feelings and everything else. Thank you very much.
Yeah, absolutely. And thanks for giving me the platform. I mean, the candor that I've had here about, my true feelings about coaches, him being difficult to play for and can be hard, but teaches you a lot. And comment on Facebook earlier today that Coach O'Leary took a lot of boys and turned them into young, successful men. And I really mean that. And it's something that I'll always take with me. And I think that he's a guy that ultimately, I think it was time for him to move on and for us to move on as a program, but I don't think that we can ever forget. I mean, for a guy like me who was a UCF fan for a long time before I was ever recruited, we are so far beyond where we were early 2000s, and especially when he got here in 2004. To think that we have a stadium and everything else that we have, we got to give him a lot of credit for that. And so thanks for allowing me to express my feelings about Coach O'Leary. And he's one of those guys that, he has an impact on you for good or bad, but not many people here in Central Florida are ever going to forget his name, and for good reason.
We shall not. Thank you very much. We will talk to you next week.
All righty. Sounds good, guys. Have a good week.
So, you know what they say, what happens in Vegas stays in Vegas. We don't need to know about your fun-filled weekend in the City of Sin, but we hope you'll click the ad on our website. It's right there to the left, the one that screams you have to save up to 50% off your next trip to Vegas. Just click on the ad and we promise never to talk about what happened in Vegas. And now, news and notes from the world of UCF sports. It's a good day when any UCF team beats the Cows.
Yes,
Kudos to women's soccer for knocking off the Heifers. 3-1 on senior night on Friday. UCF wrapped up the regular season 11-5-1, including a 6-3 mark on American play. Up next, the AAC tourney gets underway in Dallas on November 3rd, and the Knights open as the 3rd seed.
Andrew, more cow tipping. This time volleyball sends South Florida U grazing back to Tampa, plus a Friday night sweep of East Carolina. Up next, Friday at Houston.
Freshman men's soccer player Gorka Epperblay headed in the game winner, and UCF beat Memphis 1-0 on Saturday night as the Cows get the best of UCF men's soccer earlier in the week, 3-1. Up next, Cincinnati comes to town for the regular season finale on Saturday night at 7. That was quite the name.
Yes. All 30 Major League Baseball teams at the Berg this week for Scout Day. Up next Friday, black and gold game, 6 p.m. free, open to the public.
Kudos to former Knight catcher Drew Butera and his Kansas City Royals are back in the World Series. My Kansas City Royals.
Your Kansas City
Very
Royals.
excited about that.
Kudos to Drew. I remember watching him out playing. Great defensively. Can't bat worth a lick.
I reached out to him, so hopefully we'll have him on soon.
Yes. This homecoming weekend, rowing. Welcome back players from its 1995 team as it celebrates its 20th anniversary. That also included a race against the men's club team.
Men's hoops with a scrimmage Sunday afternoon. The season opener is fast approaching on November 14th.
2 women's tennis players made the round of 32 at the Southeast Regional in Athens, Georgia. Up next, the Knights are in action October 30 at the Bethune-Cookman Tournament in Daytona Beach.
And finally, softball. Recently spent time with the kids of Central Florida Miracle League. Kids who need some special assistance to play the game they love. Way to do the Knight thing, ladies.
Yes, indeed.
Yeah, it's cool. I'm glad that when they do things like that.
Baseball a couple of weeks ago did that as well with Central Florida Miracle League.
I remember that well. Well, this has been a long one, and thank you guys for hanging on if you're still there. One more thing that I have to mention. I will be on with my good friend Eric Lopez on Sports Talk Florida Insiders show on Saturday. Somewhere between 3:30 and 5:30 p.m. I'll be in there. It's coming from Universal Nissan Hyundai this Saturday at the corner of Orange Blossom Trail and 417. Stop by there, say hi, and I will be on the radio with those guys. I'm really excited about that. Thank you to Eric.
An opportunity to meet the Andrew Phegley.
Absolutely. Why wouldn't you? This has been like a crazy, crazy show, and I appreciate everybody listening. And we'll be back next week. This has been episode number 57. I'm Andrew Phegley.
I'm Trace Trylko. Go Knights!
Charge on.
UCF, charge on to the field. With our spirits, we'll never yield. Black and gold charge right through the line. Victory is our cry. B-S-E-T-O-R-Y.